So the USVI has about three main tax incentive programs. There's the Research and Technology Park, the Economic Development Program, the Enterprise Zone. And with each one, they have specific details that they want you to commit to, such as hiring a certain amount of employees, such as developing an area or developing a building, buying a lease. Maybe it's giving scholarship opportunities, giving charitable donations. And if you commit to these and you actually follow through on these, then the USVI will literally sign a document with you saying that you qualify for these programs, which gives you a 90% credit on your taxes. Now, it's not that you can just take the credit and then not live in the USVI. Like, you can be in the US, you can spend a fair amount of time there, but you need to legitimately move your tax home, your economic home for your business, and then ideally for yourself personally, like almost certainly for yourself personally. If you don't do it personally, you're just leaving open a serious amount of risk unless you actually have serious operations independent of you in the USVI. We're talking all of your data, all like a material serious amount of employees, right? So like management level employees, like management decisions, the nerve center of your business needs to be in the USVI for you to legitimately qualify. Not just for the USVI, what we're concerned with is not creating US sourced income. Because you can have this agreement with the USVI, but if you're just blatantly disregarding the US's rules, they're gonna have an issue with that. The Bureau of Internal Revenue of the USVI might not have an issue with it, but the Internal Revenue Service, they could absolutely have an issue with your tax strategy. So you gotta make sure not only you come to an agreement with the USVI, that you also don't have facts and circumstances that create US sourced income, or at least not a large material amount. If you have a little bit, then you can do something like use a blocker C corporation, and you can allocate a certain amount of profits at a reasonable arm's length into that blocker C corporation. So for example, say you make $10 million and you have a little bit of US activity that you want to compensate yourself for, and that, let's say you send yourself, you know, $250,000 of profit for that. Like, that's like 2.5, right? You would pay taxes on that $250,000 in the US, 21%. That's what, $50,000, $55,000. The rest of your $9.75 million net income is still taxed in the USVI. So there is effective planning strategies for your US presence while you still are a USVI resident. Now, again, I highly encourage that you should and need to become a USVI resident eventually. But if it was $5 million of tax savings for 6 months, living the island life, could you do it? There's worse things in the world, but if you really love your city amenities, you just wouldn't be getting your matcha lattes or your Pilates classes, so you'd have to give that up. If you can't handle that, I don't think you'll be able to handle the USVI. But if you're a pirate, deep in your soul, you just might love this. The last thing I want to talk about is the USVI compared to Puerto Rico. Ultimately, the USVI can provide less taxes overall, but it's a much smaller population compared to Puerto Rico. Like, getting things mailed to you here is more difficult. There's not a ton of crazy infrastructure. It's really desolate out here. I'm in St. Thomas. There's more densely populated areas on St. Thomas down in the downtown area, but the downtown area is like, you know, a small US town. Call it a town of, you know, 10, 20, 30,000, like that. The downtown area would be similar to a US 10, 20, 30,000 person town. So it's just not, it's not huge. It's not built to sustain, you know, one of those modern city lifestyles. But if you're making money, especially if you've got online income coming in, it may be worth it. Puerto Rico has more of that city life, but it too has the same island issues of, you know, mosquitoes, and you got to import things. It's not just everything's always available. And so Puerto Rico is also Spanish speaking, and it's a completely different tax regime. And so it's a little bit difficult to find a professional out there that can file a Puerto Rican tax return. And so you're gonna have to pay for good help out there, or you're gonna have to pay for not so good help too. So one of those two. But if you can file a US tax return, you can file a USVI tax return. So it's a little bit easier because the USVI has a mirror code. So when it comes to the compliance, if you're signing up for one of these tax incentive programs, the USVI has a little bit more upfront work, I'd say, than submitting your Act 60 decree with the PR. But the ongoing work for Puerto Rico is definitely more difficult, especially, some people need a audit, you need an annual audit, and so the ongoing fees related to the Puerto Rican taxes can be a little bit more than the USVI. It just, again, is a circumstantial thing where it's going to depend on what tax incentive program you go with, and who you're working with as a CPA. So that's an important one to think about. Ultimately, what you got to do is you got to come and visit the islands, talk to some good professionals, make a decision for yourself. Well, that's it. That's all I've got to share about the USVI. If you want to learn more, you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Happy to talk to you. Here in the USVI, getting a master class from some of the top attorneys out on the island. Myself, I've learned so much. I may have learned enough to where I'm personally not going to do the USVI, but I can certainly see circumstances in which people would want to, especially if you love that boat life. Again, you got a pirate soul. You want to be out on the open seas. If you want to live in the islands that you're not having people bother you, you want to just get away. Even if it's for 6 months in a year, a couple years or so, you want to move yourself down to the beautiful Virgin Islands, have this awesome experience. From the beautiful Ritz-Carlton here on St. Thomas, I'm Anthony Price, CPA. Thanks for watching.